Hello and welcome into episode number 2 of Reality Check. I am Matt O'Leary, joined by my co-host Jeremy. Jeremy, what's going on, my friend?
The chaos is here. You know, I got a complaint from Green Bean. He said I didn't ruffle your feathers enough, that I need to be more chaotic. I don't know what that means, but
No, you were very mellow. I thought we got along well, especially in episode 1, Tigo and Green Bean were going at it. They're going at it hard. And then next episode, like, we were so cordial and friendly. We were just getting along. It was like a polar opposite of what we saw the previous day.
yeah, it was just la la la. Here we are, just talking, having a friendly conversation. I didn't insult that peach fuzz you attempt to claim as a beard or mustache.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And there's no mention of your bald head either. So we're very cordial with each other.
We didn't talk about eggs at all.
No eggs. No eggs were mentioned at all and on the last episode. So it's funny. We spent a lot of time on the offensive line in episode 1, and we're going to do the same thing again. But I think it's such a big story for the Jets right now. It almost makes sense to focus so much on the line. So what do you want to get into today with this building up the offensive line and like the quote unquote right or wrong way to do it?
Well, I understand that. I want to qualify this. You do sometimes need to use free agency in a situation like this. If your strategy is, especially if a GM, if you're JD thinking, I'm going to lose my job and I have got to win this year, I am got to go to free agency and I've got to pay big money and I've got to get linemen. Now, if he went out and paid big money for an interior lineman, that would make no sense to me. Mainly because Connor McGovern doesn't cost you a lot, and Tippmann can move over, and so it wouldn't make sense to me to go out and pay 15 to 20 million for some stud interior lineman. It didn't work with Laken Tomlinson. I don't know why we would do that again. But the reality is, this is not a good situation for us. The fact that we might have a GM that might lose his job, that might feel he's on the hot seat, that might be making moves based on I have to win next year. And I know a lot of people are saying, I waited a long time. We've lost forever. We need to win now. I've had it. Screw the future. I just want to say, we say that every year. Like, we'll have an excuse every year to follow our immediate needs, because we say it every year. We said it in 2021. People were screaming, we don't have a tight end. We don't have a cornerback. And they were so against taking the best players available in the draft. The next year it was offensive line, which they were probably right, but not for this last season. It was more right for the long term. So I say, when does this organization start to build the right way? We were building the right way, I think, before the Zach Wilson thing didn't work out. I don't want to refocus that as the focus every time. But that really is when our strategy and the way we were building this team changed. When Zach Wilson didn't pan out, we had to go out and get a veteran quarterback. That ended up being Aaron Rodgers. It threw off a lot of what we were doing. But I also think a lot of what we were doing got thrown off just from the impatience of this. I don't know if the fan base actually makes a difference, but it feels like our owner does, at least. This obsession with, we have to do it now. It has to be now. It has to be now. Over, let's just do the smart thing. Let's look at what great organizations do, and let's be that organization. Let's be the organization that does the smart things and put us in a position to compete over year after year for a long time. That's the way to eventually get over that hump to a Super Bowl, rather than what's never worked for us, trying to immediately plug every hole and win the Super Bowl via free agency.
Yeah, they can't go completely bonkers in free agency. And we'll get into it specifically in this episode on the offensive line. But I also don't think, like, draft is most important. I think by far the draft is the most important way to build your team. But at the same time, I don't think we could ignore, not necessarily saying that you're ignoring it, but I don't think we could discount or disqualify trades and free agency. I think you need to be able to supplement your roster through free agency and trades, right? Like, you shouldn't be at the top of spending in free agency every single year. But as you mentioned, because of some of the misses in the draft, Now they kind of have to course correct a little bit to, I guess, in a better way to get this roster, into a point where they're competing for a playoff spot.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. I mean, it's a situation that we're in because we're fourth year into this rebuild, really, right? I mean, so it's from when JD really had stripped the roster and really started to fill in this roster. So I understand like there's this pressure on there, and I think that free agency does have its place. I mean, San Francisco, Trent Williams, great example of really well used free agency. The Rams did it, but understand the difference where those teams had very solid rosters when they made those free agent moves, and I guess it's debatable whether we have the solid roster to do that. And I debate we might, because my argument back to my own thinking is we do have a great defense. We do have a great running back. We do have a great wide receiver one. We have a good tight end room. I mean, we are coming together as a roster. But that aside, I want to look just to emphasize and go back to the offensive line. I want to talk about why I obsess over offensive line. I think a lot of people do, but some don't. So I'm going to just show just some history for the Jets first, and I'm going to show some other teams and what they do on the offensive line. So this is the Jets roster history. Okay. So I'm going to go to the second column right here, offensive line. When you look at our offensive line year to year, and some of this is due to injury, so I'm not going to pretend that that's not the case. But up until 2022, I want, like, if you focus on the offensive line here, because of injury, because of other things, we don't have that continuity, right? So here we are in 2018. If we go back that far, we have, if we go up from 18 to 19, our center changes. Carpenter is gone. Now we have Alex Lewis, right? Brandon Shell was there that year, but then the next year we signed Van Roten, George Fant, McGovern, a completely different looking offensive line. The only returning person in 20 was Alex Lewis, right? If we go back to our 2015, when we were 10-6, the last chance that we actually had a chance to make the playoffs, you'll see that from the previous year, there's a lot of continuity in the offensive line. 𝐒𝐿𝐫𝐞𝐞𝐽, Mangold, Giacomini, right? And you'll see it was a little bit better. And if you go back even further, the 2009, 2010, we all know that was when we were very consistent in our offensive line. From 2008, we brought back the same offensive line. The year after that, only one major change, right? And look at the success we had during those years. So I'm not saying that is the end all be all of everything, but our goal should certainly be, and we could look at other teams too, because this is very consistent amongst other organizations as well. If we look at the year the Rams won the Super Bowl, look at their returning roster. The reality is we need to settle, and we need to settle on offensive linemen to the point where we're not just putting them in like Band-Aids, where they're in for a year or two and then they're gone. And usually the best way to do that is draft and developing them so they're there with the team over time.
Yeah, and the thing that I think a big reason why we see so much turnover on the Jets offensive line during the Maccagnan era, especially, he was like allergic to drafting offensive linemen. It was crazy. They barely spent any picks on the offensive line, even when like Chuma Edoga was like the highest pick that he had on the line for a few years, which was almost, shocking when you had Nick Mangold retiring and 𝐒𝐿𝐫𝐞𝐽 Ferguson retiring in back-to-back years. That I think that was probably the time that they should have been taking advantage and getting those young guys in there instead of going with the Band-Aid fixes. Now with Douglas, it seems like with AVT and Tippmann, you could say that they have those building block pieces that were drafted and going to be developed. But because of the not AVT, excuse me, because of the Mekhi Becton miss, that is also a big, like you mentioned, the Zach Wilson miss. The Mekhi Becton miss is also a big reason why the Jets are in the spot that they are right now.
No, absolutely, and I do attribute that to injury a lot. Than just, I'm not one of these guys blaming JD because this happened to Mekhi Becton injury wise. You know, his rookie year, he looked like he was developing into an all-pro lineman that would have been amazing. He didn't have a college history of being injured. There was no indication that he would be injured. I think that we just sometimes have to accept the fact that there's no one to blame other than bad luck. And the reality is, you know, maybe we could point a little bit about Becton. Maybe the weight did mean something. Maybe if he would have stayed fitter, if he would have been a little thinner and better shape, maybe he's not out as long. But it just feels to me that it's hard for me to look at a general manager for something like that. I just look at the fact that I'm happy we have a general manager that is trying and drafting offensive linemen in the draft. Like he obviously values it, because you see when he picked Tippmann early in the first round, very valuable pick. You see when he picked AVT, he traded up to get him. You see where he picked Becton. So we don't have a problem as far as our GM recognizing the importance of drafting offensive linemen in the draft. Again, that's why, to me, I think our number one enemy is the lack of security in the jobs of our leadership right now, because that might interfere with doing the best possible strategy right now. And if they go out and start buying players at the sacrifice of the future and the entire process that we went through the past 3 years, that would be disappointing. So I want to see free agency used, but very strategically, I don't want a situation where we're going to make it impossible to retain the players we have later. I don't want bad deals now to put us in a situation where we can't retain Sauce Gardner, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, and any of the other guys that, these guys that we have coming that we're going to even be drafting. I just want to be able to do, I hope that we can operate in a way that still considers the future of the team.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I get my question back to you would be, if they will assume that pick 10 is going to be an offensive lineman, that would be 3/5 of the starting offensive line drafted by the team, Lakin in free agency. And then is it safe to assume, are you comfortable going with the 5th option in free agency? Or are you saying that also has to be in the draft?
I'm comfortable, for example, if we got Fuaga and our strategy was we sign, for example, Connor McGovern, who is an average, middle of the road, solid center. And he knows our system, and he's been here many years. And up until last year's injury has been very, very available. If you told me we were going to put him at center, we were going to put Tippmann at right guard, and Fuaga at left tackle, and AVT at right tackle, if you told me that it was going to be that kind of strategy, I'd be very comfortable with that. Now, I am still thinking that I don't know how the draft is going to play out. I do know there are a lot of interior offensive linemen in the draft. And I know that there are centers specifically that will be there in the 3rd round that are plug-and-play centers, as well as 4th round guys that might not be plug and play, but will be great for the future. Because Connor's getting old, if we bring him, it's a year-by-year basis. So we can continue on that track, because we can get a developmental center who I think by year 2 will be fine. So I think that I just don't think we should reach with free agency. I think that if we get a good, decent offensive tackle, and there are not many, at a reasonable price, where we're not overpaying or paying too lengthy a contract because of the desperation, I think it's fine. But to give in and be desperate, because some people are saying pay anything, I'm just not on board with that.
Right. I'm with you there. And that's also part of the reason why, in the 1st round, you have people who are very I want to take either Brock Bowers or Rome Odunze or a wide receiver. If that's the route that they end up going, then to me, you have to assume that they are signing 3 offensive linemen in free agency to come in here and to be starting caliber offensive linemen, which I don't think that's realistic, which is why the route of using that first round pick on a lineman and supplementing your other starting spots in free agency on the guard, like guard in particular, I don't think you need to pay someone Laken Tomlinson money to come in here and be quality. Like I think you should be able to find like Glasgow, someone like that for $7 to $8 million who can come in and be, a quality starting level guard. Because I would also go back to the Jets' strength on their offensive line, going back to, the 2008, 9, 10 era. They had a lot of veterans in there. They had their core of Mangold and DeBrick, which were draft picks, but they brought in Alan Faneca at the end of his career, and that worked really well. And they found Damian Woody in free agency for a long time, and they had Brendan Moore, who was a veteran at that point. So I think you need a little bit of both. I think anyway.
Sometimes because things don't work out. Like I'll show you, there are teams that have Detroit's entire offensive line is drafted. So is Green Bay's. So I think you're right. I think that's what free agency is. It's the supplement when things don't work out. That's exactly what it is. So if we made smart deals like that, what you're talking about, if we were to bring in a guy that's $7-8 million in interior guard and re-sign Connor McGovern and address next year with those kind of smart signings that aren't going to handcuff the team financially and stop us from retaining the players we need to retain, and they're not painful long contracts, I'm all aboard on that. Like, let's bring in those quality, they don't have to be stars. They just have to be, because not every guy on the offensive line needs to be a star. We just need available players that will play, that will develop continuity together. And I'm absolutely on board with that. What I'm against is some kind of $20 million contract on an interior guard with a fancy name that we're overpaying, or overpaying a tackle $20-something million when they're just an average tackle, because we feel this desperation of we need the guy. That's the only way we're going to win. So I would rather, if there's going to be any contract that's higher, that's a higher contract or a bigger contract, I would love to see that in a playmaker.
Okay. I think that's fair. That's fair. I think you can make a case that that's the smarter way to go about pairing. Now, do you have the examples you were saying of other teams and how they've built out their offensive lines, and maybe do the compare and contrast there?
Absolutely. So let's look at some of the teams right now that I was even talking about, the teams with the stronger offensive lines. I'm going to look at their depth charts, and we'll start with Detroit.
My favorite is how close your head gets to the camera when you pull up a website.
So people love to point out, like, oh, they're so far ahead of us in the rebuild. Why are they winning? Why is it all working out for them? First of all, it's two different situations. When JT took over, when Saleh took over the New York Jets, we literally that year had stripped the roster completely. The only person left from pre-20 is Quinnen Williams, one player. And we can look and see how many more players other teams have. So they already had more people on their roster to build around. With Detroit, that includes a quarterback, because they were able to trade their quarterback for a functional quarterback, which is something we all know we didn't have. We had to start by using our number 2 pick on a quarterback, which was probably a mistake in hindsight. But every team is in a different situation. So if we look at this offensive line, you see a left tackle that's been there since 2016. You see a left guard that's been there from 2020. You see a center who's been there from 2018. Now, this guy, I don't want to say his name. He was brought in. He was brought in because Colby wasn't ready yet. But you see that they have a guy waiting that they're developing for right guard. And then you see Sewell, who, of course, they drafted in a year that we could have drafted him. So there's your, it's 4 out of 5 guys that were drafted that are on this offensive line. They're also, just to mention, and this is part to do with luck and things like that, is that all 5 of these were return starters, right? So this was the second year this unit played together as a unit.
Right. Now, they also had I believe they had Graham Glasgow too at some point. I don't see
Yeah,
him.
yeah. Oh, yeah, he's there. He's there.
Okay, he started.
He was second string. He got, I think it was an injury or something, or Ragnar may have beaten him out for the job.
Yeah. So that's a heavy draft focus there with that offensive line, and clearly it's worked for them. And you bring up a good point too with like the position they are and where they are is because they were able to trade their quarterback, an asset that they had, and get another serviceable quarterback out of it and other draft picks. So that obviously helps.
Sure, it helps. It's a major difference because they didn't have to use those early picks on a quarterback. They actually gained a pick by making that trade with the Rams. So they got a quarterback who ended up being pretty good, and they got more draft capital from it. So here's Philadelphia, an offensive line we know very well. We've played them a couple of years in a row. Anybody who follows football knows about their running game and their offensive line. And if we look at this, you'll see that all 5 were drafted. All 5 are returning starters year after year, like from one year to the next. Look how many were there with history, right? Kelsey's been there since 2011. Jordan's been there since 2018. Lane Johnson's been there for 2013. Just on their offensive line, they have more guys on a second contract than we have on our entire team. I mean, we have pretty much, unless you want to count Hennessy, we have Quinnen Williams, right? Look at the amount of players they have on a second contract. Right?
It's vastly different. It's vastly, but they were also able to get like these guys. They're not all first rounders. They have like Dickerson was a second rounder, Kelsey a sixth rounder, Mailata a seventh rounder. So they've been able to find and develop talent better than the Jets have so far.
Absolutely, but is it because they're able to find better talent, or is it because we give up on players too soon before we develop them? Like I'm forgetting his name. Was it Chinooga? Somebody that Green Bean loves. That he was a tackle. We got rid of him because he couldn't be a tackle. Everybody, a lot of us were screaming, "Make him a guard!" And then I forgot what team he went to. He's playing guard and he's playing it well. So
Yoga,
yeah.
I think that's finding. I think that's they need to do a better job of scouting. I think these other teams have a more established rosters and cores because of their scouting ability.
I think we are now. I mean, let me give you an example. Carter Warren, and you know this, and I know you're on board with this. We got him in the 6th round. He's a second-round talent, but he got hurt on Pittsburgh and missed the end of that season. And they knew he was going to miss camp. So he didn't play and miss camp with us. He got healthy in the middle of the season. He's a rookie with no camp. Came in, was absolutely serviceable. He needed help. He's raw, but he was serviceable. And right away, people are assuming that that's who he is. And that's what – now, I'm not saying he should be our starting tackle next year. I know that that's too risky and we can't rely on that. But – how many of our fan base, and hopefully not the organization, are ready to give up on Carter Warren being one of these kind of guys, a solid starter that's on this team for the next 5 to 8 years? I mean, who says he can't develop as a starter?
I hope the hope is that he can. I don't think, and I know you're not saying this, but I don't think I'm comfortable going into a season with him as the starter. But if you go into camp and he's progressing, then that's a good sign for the future. Maybe he's a swing tackle this year, and down the line, he's your starting right tackle.
Right.
That's got to be your plan at that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know it's too late for next year. It's too late. Like I'm not saying this is what we have to. Like I understand we are way too late to do this for next year. So we have this interesting balance of. We have this small window with Aaron Rodgers. We want to have a chance to win a Super Bowl. And at the same time, I don't know about you, but I don't want to set it up that if we don't win the Super Bowl, we have to start from scratch all over again. Right? I want to, after the Rodgers years are over, I want to still have that good roster that just needs a quarterback.
I don't think it has to be that. I think you could have I don't think it has to be you're all in and then you have to blow the whole thing up after 2 years, but I also don't think you have to go full just draft for the future and kind of punt on the right now either. I think you got to find the balance of it.
That's the trick. It's the balance. And that's where I'm sitting. I'm sitting in the middle of the balance. I want to use free agency to help this team. And if there's the right tackle or guard out there that we really believe in, and we don't have to overpay to where it's gonna deplete the team somewhere else, I'm 100% for it, and I'm positive. I think that's going to happen with a playmaker more likely than with an offensive lineman. But if JD finds the guys out there, if he finds the right contracts and gets the right guys, I'm absolutely fine with that.
Do you have any other examples besides the Eagles too?
Sure. Well, Atlanta has a great offensive line. That's one of the strengths of that team that they've created over the last few years, and that's another team where we have 4 for 5 returning starters from the year before. And you can see this is a guy we all love, Matthew Bergeron. We all loved him. He took the job from Hennessy. Otherwise, they would have had 5 for 5 returning starters. But you'll see they were all drafted. 2 of them were there since 2019. They were both first rounders. Jake Matthews was there, obviously, since 2014. And then they have their center since 2021. So here's 5 for 5 drafted and all returning starters. Now, again, it's not our fault that the guys get injured. That's a lot of reason why we're not returning the same guys. But it's just another example of, here's another powerhouse offensive line, and this is how it was built. And, again, I don't want it to come off that I'm arguing that we have to do this, that we have to say, screw Aaron Rodgers, screw everything. Let's start rebuilding this way. I'm not doing that. I'm not saying that. I'm not claiming that. I'm just showing that at some point moving forward, this is where we have to get. I feel like we might be on our way. Just what you said, Matt. If Tippmann is developed and retained, if AVT comes back healthy and is retained, if we draft a guy this year, obviously, if a guy like Fuaga and stay with him for years, if Carter Warren later in the future is even if he's a swing tackle, we are heading down that path. And that's just the path I'd like to stay heading down. But over the last few years, the last 8 years as an organization, we haven't done that, right? Until JD started to do it.
Yeah, that's my biggest issue, and that's why I think the Jets look like the spot that they're in now is because of what Maccagnan did on the offensive line and ignored that for so long. And then you get some of the injuries mixed in and missing on Becton. Like they're starting to get that fundamental point, especially if you add another first round guy. And I think they should look to add an interior player in the 3rd or 4th round, so that could potentially be a 4th one to the mix down the line. But with so many needs now, they're going to have to add something in free agency.
There's no question about it. That's why I even said Connor McGovern. Well, I don't know why he's so disrespected and overlooked. I really don't. I mean, he's a middle of the league center. He's an average center. I mean, he fills that hole for us and allows Tippett to move over. And I don't even want McGovern as my first option. I just think that we definitely should bring him in because him as a depth piece. If we go into the season somehow with Connor McGovern as our backup center, I think that would be fantastic.
Even better. Well, this is Green Bay now?
This is Green Bay. What's interesting about Green Bay is they had a great offensive line, even though 𝐒𝐵𝐞𝐴TOURé didn't play, right? So they had a drafted guy from the 7th round, Rasheed Walker, and still held out at left tackle. I believe he played left tackle. And still had a great year, And here's this young player they have now, which is why they're not re-signing 𝐒𝐵𝐞𝐴TOURé. There's no way, because they have a guy who filled in for him and did fine this year, who's young and free. Doesn't cost them anything. But there you have it again. He's the only one that didn't return from the year before because of his injury, but everybody else was a returning starter and is a drafted player by the team. So again, I know we're not in that situation. I mean, if anything, we should just take it as this is an argument just for our football knowledge, maybe not for next year, not for the situation we're in, but as Jet fans, as we move along next, as from when this ends or whatever, maybe we can all understand just what this team had done wrong from 2016 to 2020 to the, you know, like all those years that we didn't address the offensive line. I think that there's nothing wrong with free agency to plug when things don't go right. I think that's what free agency should be, right? You build this great roster, but you're never going to be perfect on every position. You're going to lose players because of salary cap. And then there's free agency where you can find value and plug in guys. And, you know, while we've had some misses, I think JD has had a lot of success at that and given us very, very important parts of our team. Quincy Williams, Reed, you know, there's been some nice additions to this team. Conklin, you know, where we've added players that we all like and really appreciate being on this team.
Let's get into some of the comments as well. We'll open it up to the comment section. We also have another topic to get in the second half of the show. Before we do that, wanted to mention that there are 3 new programs, including this one on the Talkin' Jets channel. So if you haven't already, 1, subscribe. And number 2, be sure to check out Talkin' Jets Draft on Monday nights with Dom C and Ryan. You got Tigo and Green Bean on Wednesday nights, although Jeremy did a great job filling in for the under the weather Green Bean. Hopefully Green Bean's feeling better today. And this show on Thursday. So really excited for that. And of course, the Talkin' Jets draft party for the first round of the NFL draft. Sold another couple tickets today. So if you want to get in on the action, be sure to go to talkinjets.com, pick up your tickets. Main event on Long Island, 3-hour open bar. We'll be broadcasting live from there. Reactions, fan cams, buffet. Jeremy's favorite word, buffet, jumped out to him right there.
Enough to make me buy a plane ticket across the country.
Exactly. So on our merry way, it's going to be a blast. We're really looking forward to it. So let's bring up this one from Infrared, who brings up a free agent. Jermaine Illuminor signed a 1-year deal last year on a 1-year contract. He's available at right tackle starting this March. Is someone like Jermaine Illuminor, does he stand out to you as a free agent target that the Jets should be looking at?
Yeah, because he's not an overhyped name, and he's a serviceable guy who could fill the position for us.
I agree.
And he allows Carter Warren to compete for the position, because I don't think that – I think while I don't want to rely on Carter Warren, I want him to be allowed to compete.
Yeah, and he's not a bigger – for instance, like I think Trent Brown and I also think that oh my God, Jonah Williams are 2 names who are going to get paid a lot of money, and I'm not like really sold that Illuminor is that much different than them, but he's not going to get paid anywhere close to the amount of money that those other 2 guys are going to get on the open market.
Agreed. And that's kind of, you know, I think if you had one piece, if you need one piece, you're ready to go to the Super Bowl. I mean, like everything is in place, and all you need, and that's the weakest part of your team, and there's a star out there, right? For, you know, a big name right tackle or left tackle out there, that's fine, right? When it's that final piece of the puzzle, we have a few more than one piece needs. So we have to be a little bit more careful than that. We have to be able to find some value guys like this.
William Sprague comes in with the super chat. He says, "You guys are sexy as hell. Great new show." That William, this is why you are a gentleman and a scholar. We appreciate your support. And it's okay to lie about Jeremy on camera. A little bit better.
He lies about me all the time. I love him. Thank you, William.
Hawk has a good question that I think is worthwhile to get into. He says, "Is there anyone that would feel comfortable with making AVT starting left tackle?" Jeremy, I'll throw it to you first. Any thoughts on the idea of Elijah Vera Tucker at left tackle?
If we have to, I feel comfortable with AVT anywhere. I trust him anywhere. I mean, it's not ideal. It's not what I would prefer, but it's not because I'm not comfortable with him. I mean, I trust him anywhere, but I do think we need to find the position for this guy. Like, they need to just end this. Like, he needs to have his position, and that's who he is. I would much rather draft, you know, a lot of people know I'm a Fuaga guy for left tackle. That's, I mean, assuming the other 2 are gone. Like, I'm a Fuaga guy. That's the way I would love to see the draft to go. Unless we get a great trade offer to trade down and go with a guy like Guyton. But for the most part, I really want to see AVT either at right tackle or right guard, based on what kind of talent we're able to acquire this offseason.
So some people will push back and say that Fuaga's only played at right tackle in college, and maybe he would be better suited at right tackle than left tackle. So it's interesting, right? Like, I think you can make a case for let's say Fuaga's the pick, because, you know, I think if you had to put a betting favorite on who's most likely going to be, Fuaga feels like the name, right? And then maybe Fashanu, but he might go earlier. But moral of the story, let's just use Fuaga as the example. I think you can make a case for playing him at right tackle and AVT at left tackle might be better off for them in the short term.
Well, best five. Best five. Yeah. I mean, like, I would love it for them to not, like, when they say best five and then they put a guy in one place and never give him a chance at the other place, I don't see how they're saying best five. But if they go in early in camp and they move them and shuffle them and look at their tendencies and their talents and allow it to be a competition, and you tell me AVT is better than Fuaga, and that's the best five that we can put out there, like, I'm very comfortable with AVT being there. I think Fuaga has the skill set to move to left tackle. Which is why I'm talking about him that way, as a guy who can go other way, where there are right tackles that I don't see that you can move to the left side. I see Fuaga as one that you can. But I'm always about competition, because I watched it work for the Seattle Seahawks. Like, I'm like, you know, when I see things in life that work, and when Pete Carroll took over that team and allowed Russell Wilson to beat out the quarterback who they had paid tons and tons of money to from Green Bay, and didn't care because he had a true competition, that sold me on, you bring the guys to camp, you put the best, 90 that are in camp, and then it's a competition.
Yeah, I think, having the competition is important, because like last year, this was a good example, but a bad result. But they pretty much gift wrapped Dwayne Brown the left tackle opportunity. They were like, okay, we're going to bring him back, and he's our guy starting left tackle. And he wasn't healthy all training camp. He comes in at the start of the year, wasn't very good, gets hurt in week 2, and then is out the rest of the year. And it was like, I don't know. Part of me wished that they didn't just go, okay, yeah, we're comfortable, we're going to bring Dwayne Brown back, and it's his job. And, there's not really a competition. They said there was, but that wasn't a real competition. Everyone in the world knew that Dwayne Brown was going to get that starting job to start the year.
Yeah. I think that their mistake was, like we're saying, I wouldn't want to rely on Carter Warren. The big mistake was relying on Dwayne Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a tremendous mistake.
Risky. That was the thing, that last year's offensive line, there was potential there, but it had such variance because you needed everything to break right in order for them to have success. And pretty much everything broke the opposite way, and it turned into a disaster.
Absolutely. It was a disaster. It's as bad as an offensive line as I've ever seen a team try to play with. So
look at this. We got Johnny Football giving you some love. He goes, Jeremy scouted Fuaga at the Senior Bowl. If he says Fuaga can play left tackle, I have to believe him. Look at that. People putting stock in the Jeremy scouting department.
I would trust Dom C more. Although I believe that Dom C is on board with believing he can play left tackle, because if he wasn't, I don't know if I'd say it as confidently. I mean, everything I say is, I have different opinions than Dom C sometimes, but you'll notice the tone in which I take when I speak them. When Dom C's on board, I'm a lot more confident. When I'm going against Dom C in his opinion, and I have a different take, I'm a lot more, I think that maybe this guy could do,
give yourself the ability to walk it back after the fact.
Yeah.
How about this? Nice and Nice featuring Naughty the Chat, Dano wants to call it.
Nice and Nice, Naughty the Chat, as just the name of the show.
I suppose we might have to rebrand.
That's do we just need to be even meaner to each other? I mean, it's kind of would just become like, Nick. I mean, we don't want it to become that, where he's just outwardly assaulting me verbally and harassing me verbally. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll eventually we will bump heads and be in total disagreement on something. and then we'll have our moment.
Perfect.
Maybe with our next topic. You never know.
It very well could be with our next topic. You want to hop into that a little bit? We'll get into some storylines from the Super Bowl. So Mecole Hardman catches the game-winning touchdown. I don't know. How did you react? Because I went down to Atlantic City with some of my friends. We were watching at the BetMGM Sportsbook at Borgata, which was awesome. It was such a cool experience. And my reaction was, it was holy shit. I can't believe that Mecole Hardman is the one who caught the game-winning touchdown. That was my takeaway.
Yeah. Is that spelled right, by the way?
Narrative or Hardman?
Mecole.
Oh, so it's not spelled right.
That's something I could bust your chops about, you see?
Yeah, I had the extra L in there.
Because usually you see, I think you're trying to trap me because everybody knows I mispronounce names all the time. You were trying to get me to mispronounce his name so you could all laugh at me. So when I said Mecole Hardman,
it doesn't take much.
It doesn't take much to make me mispronounce a name, but I had the same reaction as you. My reaction had nothing to do with being upset that the Jets released him and we released a good player. And I wasn't thinking, oh, we didn't utilize him right. And oh, this and that. None of that bothered me. And I guess we'll talk about why. But what bothered me just was knowing the fact that he caught the big bomb pass, the big deep pass, and knowing that he caught that touchdown pass. I knew I was going to have to read it. I knew I was going to have to go onto Twitter and go onto Facebook and hear all about how that's another example of we don't know how to use talent and we messed up and he's so good and why did we let him go? And that was why I said in my tweet, of course it was Hardman.
Yeah, I did too, but most people were like, that was kind of the thing. It was like, LOL, like I can't, of course it was Mecole Hardman. But then it was weird. I got some pushback on it where it was, well, like it was the scheme. It wasn't the player. And I was like, yeah, I agree. Like I didn't think my take came across as that I was saying that the Jets made this big grand mistake moving on. That wasn't what I was like, okay, yeah, they moved on from him. That's fine. It didn't work out fine, but to me, it was just funny that, like, of course, it's the former Jet, not the Jets made this big, massive mistake.
You know what you have to do? Every time you send out a tweet, I learned this by the same way you did, because it had like even that to me saying, of course, it was Hardman was too much for some people. You have to assume, and this is what I'm going to do to never upset somebody with my tweets again. You have to assume that everybody has the intelligence of 𝐒𝐿. Just pretend everybody in the Twitter world is 𝐒𝐿 and understand that that's how clear you have to be. You can't be cryptic at all. Okay, you can't be sarcastic. You have to work at the very simplest, lowest bottom level. Okay.
You're terrible. I can't believe that.
Well, come on. Was he not the first person going crazy on Twitter because of those tweets explaining that it was scheme and blah, blah, blah? And it was like, but all I wrote was, of course, it was Hardman. I didn't say it was because of the Jets.
Yeah, I mean, he was one there. I had more than just 𝐒𝐿, but yes, he did. He was going a little bit nuts. I also I want to pull it up because I want to give you a laugh on it. But I think I tweeted this out, and similar kind of reaction that you explained. I said, as a diehard 49ers fan, it's very clear Kyle Shanahan can't win the big game. He should go back to being an OC, just spitballing, but maybe with Robert Saleh. I say that with a Jets profile picture, and obviously very tongue-in-cheek. And
amazingly, like, if anybody believes that wasn't complete sarcasm and making fun of the Niner fans that are saying to fire him.
Right. Right. So then, like, you're a 49ers fan, you have a Jets in your profile. Dude, you're missing the point here, right? You're missing the point. And I think some were just missing the point that it's not that the Jets made a mistake or that Mecole Hardman's some great receiver or this and that. It's just you kind of just throw your hands up and go, of course, that's how it was going to end.
You know, there are people on Twitter saying it was the defensive coordinator for the Niners needs to get fired. You know, like, I don't understand. Like, if you watch that game, the 49ers lost that game because, well, I don't know if they would have definitely won it, but I sent you the analysis and you saw it too. And everybody needs to understand. And a lot of people said, oh, you see, Purdy's not the guy. He couldn't throw the touchdown when it mattered. No, 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 no. They missed the block on that third down play in overtime. They missed the block. It was an easy touchdown, and it would have been a touchdown. But a backup offensive lineman for the Niners, and that's, again, the importance of continuity and offensive line, is there was a backup offensive lineman who missed his assignment. And that's why Jones came right through, and that's why Purdy had no opportunity to look up and see that he had a wide open wide receiver and a give-me touchdown. And that's why they didn't score the touchdown. It wasn't the defensive coordinator. It wasn't Shanahan. It wasn't Purdy. It was just they had a backup offensive lineman who missed an assignment on that play.
Yep. That's all that happened, which again is it's frustrating that sometimes these things happen. But what was your take on the beat pretty much firing off? I think you had Rich Cimini and Brian Costello had a combined 10 tweets mentioning Mecole Hardman's name.
It's sickening. It's so they were prepared for it. I bet you they had it prepared in case Mecole Hardman does anything. Let me get my tweets ready so I can rub the salt in the wounds of every Jet fan and do everything I can to get lots of attention and lots of discussion. And it's okay. I'm not even going to attack them for it. It's their job. It's how they make their living. So I'm not even going to put them down for it. I just think that people have to remember that anything that you see on Twitter that gets a big reaction out of you, that was the exact intent of the tweet, to get that big reaction out of you, especially when it comes from a guy like Rich Cimini, because that's his job. His job is to get lots of reaction.
Yeah. No, it is. That's his job. And I guess it worked. It's just annoying that that's something that we have to deal with.
Of course. I mean, come on, how many times do we have to feel that pain? I mean, even remember when we played Carolina and Darnold to Anderson, I mean, like we're just meant to feel this pain. Like I'm already thinking about who we're going to play next season. That's going to make us feel pain.
Yeah, well, I don't know, let's say Zach Wilson gets traded somewhere and then is a backup quarterback and they win a Super Bowl. Then it's like, oh, the Jets made some mistake because they moved on from Zach Wilson and he backed up, I don't know, insert quarterback here that wins the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, I fully expected Brock Purdy to get hurt and for Sam Darnold to come in and be the hero.
I mean, Greenbean was saying it on Talkin' Jets the week before. Yeah. That's what he was saying. He's like, this is, this is gonna happen.
Let me tell you something. I checked the betting app to see if there were odds on it. If there were odds on like Darnold scoring, throwing 2 touchdowns or throwing a touchdown, I was gonna look and see what the odds were, and I was gonna put some money on it. I was ready to place a bet on a guy who wasn't even scheduled to start the game because I thought so strongly there's such a strong chance because it's the Jets that somehow Darnold's going to get in that game and do something.
Unbelievable. How about this one from Dana? While we're on the topic of former Jets, would you take Darnold to back up Rodgers?
I would. I mean, I don't think the team would. Oh, you know what? He wouldn't be my first choice or anything like that. But if let's say we couldn't get the guys we want. He's not, you know what I mean? Let's say we couldn't get, because they don't want to go there. They want to go to a place, they have a place to play or whatever. Let's say if, and we all know the same guys, right? We're always Brissett, Minshew. I know that it's always the same names come up. Let's say we try to get those guys and we can't get them. And Darnold's the guy we bring in. It could be a lot worse. In my opinion, it could be a lot worse. Am I happy about it? I mean, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's kind of craziness, but I don't think it. Okay, let me think about it from a guy that's not a Jet fan. Like, let me be not a Jet fan for a second. If I'm another kind of team that's looking for a backup quarterback, and my general manager gives me Sam Darnold as the backup, I'm not angry.
But the Jets can't do it because of the optics of it. Right? Like it's more the optics of it. And plus, I don't know. For my backup quarterback, I like a safe option. That's why I like Jacoby Brissett, because he kind of just manages the game and he doesn't turn the ball over. Someone like Sam Darnold or even Jameis Winston, former starters, former high-end picks, can make really explosive plays, but turn the ball over at an insane clip. Like, that's not what I really look for in a backup. I look for the safer option.
Yeah, no, I mean the guy with the proven highest floor.
Yeah.
Right? The proven highest floor. I mean, Brissett did a fine job in Cleveland. And then we saw that he did well against us, for Washington. But in Cleveland, he was I don't think they improved when Watson came in.
No.
Like, it didn't look any better.
No. They definitely didn't. Anthony S gives his best case scenario: Rodgers, Brissett, Michael Pratt, who is a Matt O'Leary fan favorite in the draft. What would you think of that quarterback room?
I'd be okay with it. I think, Pratt, he's not one of my guys that jumped out to me, but then again, I'll honestly say I didn't watch enough. I didn't, have time to watch everyone. So I haven't watched enough of Pratt. So he's not a guy that I'm all about, but I know that Dom C likes him. I know that you like him. So, I mean, it's fine with me. I think that it's okay to take a shot in those later rounds at a development quarterback. It's, again, you don't want to rely on it. We talk about that because statistically it doesn't work out that often. Now, the reason I'm more interested in the kid from Florida State is Travis, I think.
Yeah, Jordan Travis.
Is because I think he would be a much higher rated prospect without the injuries. So I think there's more upside with that. Like, because he has similarities to Jaden Daniels and Marcus May. There's some things there I really like about him.
Yeah, that's fair. And we talked about it too. Like, you could pretty much IR him and have him really red shirt the year. Pratt is, I mean, he's any one of these mid-round guys. It's hard enough to find quarterbacks even in the first round that hit. Yeah. So it's even more of a dart throw in the mid-round, but you're really just looking for traits. I like his ability to use his legs. He's made some big time throws at Tulane, down the field. He's kind of just a playmaker who, again, like, he's not ready to come in and play right away. That's why he's not going to go in the first round. He's probably a third or fourth round pick, but I don't know. I think there's some interest there.
Yeah. I mean, and I think you said it right. I mean, it's, every once in a while you do it. I mean, I just want to say the reality is since 2000, if you take every quarterback that was drafted after the third round or later, since 2000, and look at the results of who became significant players in the NFL, like made it to be a starter, to be a real starter that was significant that you'd want as your starter, it's just under 4%. So it's not impossible, but it's also just so people have an understanding of how unlikely it is. And, there has to be, that's why I like to say there's a reason they're being picked that late. Like Hendon Hooker. I know that Tigo doesn't like him. But I will say that I think that his story's not over yet. I think that's a guy who slipped because of reasons, his age, his injury history. But if you look at his film, was a first round prospect.
He was going to go higher than where he was drafted because he's injured. I wasn't a big Hendon Hooker guy because of his age. Like, he was going to have to sit, and he's already older. So that kind of turned me off from him.
Right. But now Detroit, they went through that year. They didn't need him. Right. Now they're in a nice position where I think they have better than that 4% chance that Hooker could be someone for them if they need him.
Now, your Tony the GM partner is not a Pratt fan because he doesn't think he has an arm for the Northeast. Are you going to walk back you're going to walk back your take now because this is your guy?
No, because here's the difference between me and him. I look at it as there's no evidence he could be, which makes it very risky. So I could say that's a problem if you have two columns, negatives and positives. I could say, okay, fine, that's a check on the negative. There's not a lot of evidence that he could play in and has the arm strength to play in a place like the Northeast, where you want a guy with some arm strength, right? In the North, because you're going to be playing in the wind, especially at MetLife. You can make arguments that you want to see evidence the guy has a strong enough arm to throw in the wind and do all that. But at the same time, I don't think no evidence means I say that means he absolutely can't. Because Phil Simms wasn't known for a very strong arm, and and Chad Pennington wasn't known to have a super strong arm, right? And they did fine. So while I might agree that's a check and a concern that's legitimate, I'm not going to say that means he automatically will be a bust. So no, I'm not a person I'm not the Sith. I don't think in absolutes.
I like that. I like that rebuttal. And also, like, I don't know, Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold had pretty good arms and they didn't work out, and they were first round picks. Like, and again, like someone like Pratt, it's a third round or fourth round pick. The chances of him actually being a upside of like a good NFL starter is slim to begin with. Yeah, it's I don't know. I'm not buying it as that being the reason why I'm like, oh, he definitely can't work out in New York.
Right. I mean, there's the difference between guy doesn't show me evidence versus guy cannot be good. Not showing evidence could be the system you're in. It could be the situation you're in. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't.
Now, how about Alan? He's been active in the chat, says he doesn't think the Jets should take a quarterback in the in the 2024 draft because he doesn't trust the regime to pick a new quarterback.
I mean, that's a take. I mean, I don't think it's outrageous to say if someone is against them, if someone doesn't want them to take a quarterback, I think it's a perfectly reasonable argument to just say we need players. And I think that in the fourth round, there's still defensive tackles there. There's still tight ends, running backs for maybe another, right now, we don't know if 𝐒𝐻𝐿 is going to be an RB2, if he's going to be a starting running back. Because nowadays, the number 2 running back is technically a starter. They're going to get carried. They're not a backup. They're not a reserve. So I can understand that take. I think it's about the player. I don't think it's either right or wrong. I'm not so down on this regime to say I don't trust them to take a quarterback because of one Zach Wilson, but I will say I don't think it's one way or the other that you have to. I don't think you have to take a developmental quarterback, and I don't think it's so extreme that you shouldn't. I think it's who's the guy. If Pratt is there in the fourth round and he's on their board and they love him, I'm not against them taking him.
Yeah, it's also they've only done it once, and obviously it could not be any more abundantly clear that it hasn't worked out with Zach Wilson, the number 2 pick. But just because it didn't work the first time, it's a guarantee that it's not going to work the second time. I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily fair.
I mean, 70% of the GMs in the NFL, at least that are on record saying it, with the Jets pick, with a need, if they had a needed quarterback, would have taken Zach Wilson in that draft. 70%. So to say that 70% of the GMs all are incompetent and can never pick a quarterback, it just doesn't work in my mind.
I'm with you. Johnny Jimenez, big supporter of us, goes, oh snap, we have another show. I'm with it. For our draft pick should be an offensive line, which kind of brings us full circle here as we were focusing on the offensive line at the start of the show.
Yeah, I don't believe in that you can overinvest in an offensive line, although I will say we need another weapon. I mean, if we're really serious about winning next year, yes, we need a lot of help in the offensive line, but we definitely need another weapon. We just do. Because I could probably pull up the same kind of charts and graphs and show all winning teams and show that they went in with more balance than we'd be going in with who as our WR2, Lazard.
Yeah, not ideal. Hawk, the interesting comment from Hawks, I want to pull this up before we get out of here for today. He says, sign Derrick Henry as RB2. Best $10 million we'd spend all offseason. Don't want to lose the AFC Championship game because we saved $10 million on a playmaker. Is that the direction that you would like to see the Jets go with $10 million this offseason?
That's rough. I mean, but here's the thing. Is it even worth talking about? Is Derrick Henry at the point of his career, do you think he's willing to sign with a team that has a Breece Hall on it? Do you think he's accepting an RB2 role?
No, I don't. I think he'll go. I could see someone like, if the Chargers don't bring back Eckler, I could see Harbaugh being like, I just want a bulldozer running back there and put in Derrick Henry.
And I think, look, it'd be hard to be mad. Derrick Henry's a pretty big name, but like it's a misspending of money if you do it. Based on our financial situation and needs, it's a allegation of money. I don't know. You're putting the money in the wrong place. That's just too much to put in the position, regardless of the player. And I don't worry too much about it because I know there's no situation in which Derrick Henry says I want to be a Jet for $10 million and be a number 2 running back. It's just not going to happen.
I don't know if you'd want to go this route, but I think Dalvin Cook's going to be a free agent again. Now, Jake Asman hops in. What's going on, Jake? He says, "I love you, Jeff Ulbrich." Jeremy, any thoughts on your famous quote?
I think that Jake needs to buy a shirt. You know, if you go to the Jets Talk merchandise, there's an "I love you, Ulbrich" shirt. And I think that you should definitely get it. I think it would look great on you, especially when you're doing your shows. Because I know you're a big fan of the line and that you enjoyed it so much. So I would say go get the shirt. It's in Talking Jets in the merch store.
It's so good. It's so good. So I think that's going to about wrap it up for this show. We kind of went through, we did both the offensive line, the right way to build an offensive line. Then we did some Mecole Hardman narrative. Any closing thoughts before we hop out of here on this one, Jeremy?
No, just, sometimes people take away the wrong message from what I'm saying. I am not against trying to win next year. I'm not against trying to solidify our offensive line via free agency in the draft. I was just pointing out long-term, also how we need to think in the future, and moving forward about how to build an offensive line, the importance of it.
Absolutely. So, all right, that's going to do it for Jeremy and I. Before you go, make sure to leave a like, support the channel, subscribe, become a member. Check out talkinjets.com for your draft tickets. We are excited. For now, I'm Jeremy. I'm Matt. He's Jeremy. There we go.
Sure. Now he wants to be me. You see that? Everybody
don't want to be. I want to make it abundantly clear. I do not want to be Jeremy.
I got the razor. I could shave your head for you, buddy. Take care, everyone.
We'll catch you next time.